Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight begin to paint the sky in soft hues of orange and pink, I enter the bakery kitchen. It's a sanctuary, a realm where every ingredient, every movement has a story, a purpose. Here, I am more than a baker. I am a craftsman, an artist who shapes not just dough, but also moments and memories. The day begins with flour. It's the foundation, the canvas on which I paint my culinary masterpieces. Its type, its texture, the way it blends with water, all these factors are critical. They dictate the taste, the aroma, the very soul of the buns I bake. Choosing the right flour is an art in itself. It requires knowledge, experience, and a deep respect for the craft. For sweet buns, my choice is always the highest grade of flour. It's finer, almost silken to the touch, and it contains less protein compared to bread flour. This fine texture is crucial. It's what makes the buns light and airy, soft and tender. When mixed with other ingredients, sugar, eggs, butter, it creates a dough that's smooth, pliable, and uniform. It's like watching a symphony come together, each ingredient playing its part in harmony. Sometimes, I add a sprinkle of flour mixed with a leavening agent. This is my secret for achieving an extra lift, especially for those buns where I desire a fluffy, cloud-like texture. The leavening agent is like a whisper, a gentle nudge that elevates the dough to new heights. Water is next. Its temperature is crucial. Not too hot, lest it kills the yeast. Not too cold, lest it slows them down. Water is more than just moisture. It's a catalyst. It transforms the flour, awakens it, turning it into a living entity. This transformation is almost spiritual, a connection between the baker and the dough. Then comes the yeast. These tiny granules are like magic, a testament to the wonders of nature. As I mix them into the dough, I watch in awe as it begins to change, to breathe. It's a mesmerizing dance, a blend of science and magic. The yeast breathes life into the dough, endowing it with volume, with character. Balance is key in baking. Salt and sugar are the scales on which this balance rests. Salt heightens flavors, while sugar adds a touch of sweetness. Together, they create a symphony of tastes, a harmony that must be carefully calibrated. Too much or too little, and the melody is lost. Kneading the dough is a moment of connection, of creation. I feel the dough becoming elastic, responding to my touch. In this moment, I am not just a baker, I am a sculptor, shaping my creation with each fold, each press of my palms. It's an intimate dance, a dialogue between the baker and the dough. The rising of the dough is a period of anticipation, of quiet reflection. It's not idle time, but a moment filled with possibilities. As the dough rests and grows, I envision what it will become, how it will taste, how its aroma will fill the bakery. Shaping the buns is a final act of creation. Each one receives a piece of my soul, a fragment of my story. They are not mere baked goods. They are expressions of art, each with its own character, its own narrative. And then, the baking. As the buns enter the oven, a transformation occurs. The heat, the smell of baking bread, it's a confirmation of my skill, my dedication. The aroma that fills the kitchen is a testament to my craft. Each bun that emerges from the oven is not just a product of my labor. It is a piece of art, a creation born from my hands, my heart, my inner world. As the last of the morning's buns found their place upon the weathered wooden counter, I opened the door to the bakery. The world outside was just awakening, bathed in the gentle caress of the early sun. The light spilled into the room, painting everything in a warm, golden hue. I stood at the threshold, hands wiping absently on my apron, a symbol of my craft. The morning was quiet, save for the distant hum of the waking town. It was a moment of tranquility, a brief respite before the day unfolded. Then, she entered. Her entrance was like a scene from a dream. The sunlight seemed to find her, to play among the strands of her hair, turning them into shimmering gold. Her eyes were a clear, deep blue, like pools reflecting the vastness of the sky. In that moment, the world seemed to stand still, the sounds of the morning fading into a hushed silence. I, who had spent countless hours in the mastery of dough and oven, suddenly found myself at a loss. My hands, so skilled in the art of baking, now felt awkward, uncertain. I tried to form words, a simple greeting, but they tangled on my tongue, leaving me feeling exposed, vulnerable. Her gaze met mine, and I was lost in the depth of those eyes. The bakery, with its sense of fresh bread and pastries, became a distant reality. All that existed was her and the subtle aroma of the buns, a gentle thread linking us in that quiet hour. "Good morning," I managed to say, my voice a faint echo of its usual confidence. Her smile was a revelation. It cut through the awkwardness, the tension, like a ray of light through a morning mist. "Good morning. It smells wonderful in here. Could I have one of those scones?" Her voice was melodic, a soft breeze on a summer day. "Of course," I replied, my fingers carefully selecting one of the fluffiest buns, a creation I took pride in. "This is one of our specialties, with a unique filling. It's quite popular here in town." She looked at the bun with an expression of genuine interest. "I'd love to try it. My name is Stacy," she said, extending her hand towards me. "Sean," I responded, my hand meeting hers. The contact was brief, but it sent a current through me, electric and startling. Stacy's smile lingered as she accepted the bun and paid. "Thank you, Sean. I'll be sure to come back." Her departure left a void in the bakery. The space felt larger, emptier, despite the presence of other customers. The encounter lingered in my mind, her name echoing like a melody yet to be completed. My heart continued to beat in a rhythm fueled by excitement, an unfamiliar sensation that I knew would mark this day as unforgettable. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Customers came and went, exchanging pleasantries, making their purchases. But my thoughts were elsewhere, caught in the memory of Stacy's visit. Her smile, her voice, the way the light played in her hair, it all replayed in my mind, a loop of wonder and curiosity. In the quieter moments, I found myself gazing at the door, half expecting her to return. But as the sun climbed higher, casting its midday glow through the bakery windows, I realized that the day would continue on, just as it always had. Stacy, the newcomer to our small town, was a breath of fresh air amidst the familiar faces of the regulars. From the moment she arrived, her presence was like a gentle breeze, stirring the stillness of our routine lives. She was friendly and approachable, her smile a constant companion that seemed to effortlessly bridge the gap between stranger and friend. In the days that followed, Stacy became a frequent visitor to my bakery. Each of her visits was like a personal celebration, a small but significant event that brightened my day. She would often choose a loaf of bread, sometimes engaging in conversation about the varieties of grain or the process of baking. Each interaction, no matter how brief or mundane, felt laden with meaning, growing increasingly precious with time. I soon learned that Stacy had taken up a teaching position at the local school. Our conversations often veered towards her work, her students, and the small joys and challenges of teaching. There was a palpable passion in her voice when she spoke about her job, a love for education that resonated deeply with me. It was impossible not to admire her dedication, her enthusiasm for shaping young minds. As days turned into weeks, my fondness for Stacy grew. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated me, but the aura of kindness and intelligence that she radiated. She drew the attention of many, both in town and at school. Men admired her, and young hearts looked up to her. Yet Stacy remained seemingly aloof to this admiration. She was always amiable, always willing to engage in conversation, but I never saw her form a close bond with anyone in town. There was an air of mystery surrounding her, a sense of solitude that she seemed to embrace. It was as if Stacy lived in a world of her own, a private universe populated by her thoughts and dreams. I found myself yearning to be a part of that world, to cross the invisible barrier that seemed to surround her. Yet I was unsure how to bridge that distance. Each day with her, even from behind the counter of my bakery, felt like a gift. I began to cherish the small details of our interactions, the way her eyes lit up when she smiled, the inflection in her voice when she spoke, the simple, yet heartwarming way she said my name. These moments, fleeting as they were, left a profound imprint on my heart. The The bakery became a haven for these exchanges. The scent of fresh bread, the warm ambiance of the oven, the rhythm of the daily routine, all of it was backdrop to the growing connection I felt with Stacy. In the midst of flour and dough, amidst the routine of baking and selling, there was a budding sense of something more, something deeper. Her visits were unpredictable, yet I found myself anticipating them with a mixture of eagerness and anxiety. Each time the bell above the door chimed, signaling a new customer, my heart would leap, hoping it was Stacy. And when it was, the world seemed to brighten, if only for a few moments. We spoke about mundane things, weather, the quality of the wheat harvest, the town's small happenings. But beneath the simplicity of these conversations, there was a current of unspoken understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the mutual interest that was slowly, subtly growing between us. Stacy's presence in the town was like a puzzle, one that everyone noticed but couldn't quite piece together. She was friendly yet reserved, open yet private. There was a grace about her, an elegance that seemed to stem not just from her appearance, but from her very being. My thoughts often drifted to her outside the confines of the bakery. I found myself wondering what she did in her free time, what her home was like, what dreams and aspirations she harbored. This curiosity was a new feeling for me, a baker who had always been more focused on yeast and flour than on the mysteries of the human heart. In Stacy, I saw a kindred spirit, someone who, like me, seemed to find joy in the simpler things in life. Yet, there was also a depth to her, a complexity that intrigued and mystified me. It was this combination of simplicity and complexity that drew me to her, that made each of her visits a moment to savor. As the days passed, my admiration for her grew. It was not just a physical attraction, though she was undeniably beautiful. It was something deeper, a connection that I couldn't fully understand or explain. It was as if she had walked into my life and, without even trying, changed the rhythm of my days. Each evening, as I closed the bakery and reflected on the day, my thoughts would invariably turn to her. I wondered if she thought of me, if she felt the same subtle, yet undeniable pull that I felt. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was aware of the fragility of this budding connection, scared to disrupt the delicate balance that had formed between us. I wanted to know more about her, to be a part of her world, but I was cautious, uncertain of how to proceed without risking the comfortable rapport we had established. In our small town, where every face was familiar and every story known, the arrival of Stacy had been like a stone thrown into a still pond, creating ripples that touched every shore. But as the days turned into weeks, those ripples turned into waves, carrying with them whispers of a hidden past, of secrets untold. The rumors started as mere murmurs, but soon grew into a cacophony of suspicion and judgment. They said Stacy was hiding something dark, something from a past she was trying to escape. The women and girls of the town, stung by the attention she drew from men, began to weave tales more suited to a gothic novel than our quiet community. They painted her as a fallen woman, a mysterious figure who had fled to our town to hide from a litany of sins and misdeeds. At the school where Stacy taught, the whispers followed her like a shadow, manifesting in the curious and often inappropriate questions from her students. She faced these intrusions with a quiet dignity, responding with nothing more than a serene smile and a steadfast refusal to entertain their curiosity. One morning, the cruelty of these baseless speculations was laid bare for all to see. Someone had defaced the door of Stacy's home with the words "Witch House" scrawled in a jagged hand. Seeing this, a mix of anger and sorrow welled up within me. It was a stark and ugly manifestation of the town's whispers, a physical mark of the invisible wounds they were inflicting upon her. When Stacy next visited my bakery, the change in her was heartbreakingly clear. The sparkle that had once danced in her eyes seemed dimmed, as if clouded by the shadows of the town's rumors. Her smile, once so full of warmth and light, now carried a tinge of sadness, a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. "Are you okay?" I asked as she approached the counter, my voice tinged with a concern I could not hide. She sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Yeah, I'm fine, Sean. Just a little tired," she replied, but her voice was a mere echo of its usual self. Handing her the scone she usually bought, I struggled to find words of comfort, of support. "It's about the house. I think the bullies will be punished," I said, my voice trailing off, aware of the inadequacy of my words against the torrent of rumors she faced. For a brief moment, as she looked up at me, I saw a flicker of gratitude in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the small kindness I was trying to offer. "Thank you, Sean," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the noise of the bakery. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of unease. The rumors, so cruel and unfounded, had begun to cast a long shadow over Stacy's life in our town. I found myself wrestling with a sense of helplessness, wondering how such malice could have taken root in a community I had always thought of as kind and close-knit. As I went about my work, my mind kept returning to Stacy, to the injustice of her situation. I felt a growing resolve to stand by her, to offer whatever support I could in the face of the town's unkindness. The rumors about Stacy in our small town grew and twisted like ivy, invading every conversation and coloring every perception. They spiraled out of control, fed by fears and fancies that belonged more to the realm of fairy tales than reality. People began to whisper of seeing her in the woods at night, her form flitting between the trees like a specter, engaging in rituals that defied explanation. They spoke in hushed tones of pets gone missing, insinuating her involvement in dark acts beyond the pale of civilized society. The words scrawled on her house, witch, lecherous, fallen woman, were like a physical manifestation of the town's growing hysteria. I watched this transformation of perception with a growing sense of horror and helplessness. It pained me deeply to witness the town I called home, usually so mundane and unassuming, become a breeding ground for such wild and malicious tales. The Stacy I knew, kind, intelligent, and gracious, seemed a world away from the figure these rumors painted. The accusations were not just cruel, they were absurd. But absurdity has a strange power in small towns, where the mundane can quickly become mystical. The more outlandish the stories, the more eagerly they seem to be believed and spread. Michael and his girlfriend Emily were particularly active in fanning these flames. Michael, I learned, had tried to win Stacy's attention, but she had politely turned him down, which seemed to hurt his pride. Emily, in turn, hated Stacy because Michael had almost dumped her and was courting a new teacher. Their words and insinuations added a veneer of credibility to the rumors, lending them an air of legitimacy that was hard to counter. I attempted to confront them, to appeal to their better natures, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. They seemed to derive a perverse satisfaction from Stacy's growing isolation, convinced of the righteousness of their cause. Stacy's visits to the bakery became fewer and further between. When she did come, it was in the early hours of the morning, when the streets were still shrouded in mist and the rest of the town was asleep. The vibrant woman I had come to know was now a shadow of herself. Her eyes, once so bright and lively, were dulled by the weight of the town's suspicions. The playful banter we once shared was replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by the most perfunctory of exchanges. Each time she left, I felt a piece of her slip away, eroded by the relentless tide of rumors and accusations. The situation weighed heavily on me. The injustice of it all, the cruelty based on nothing but hearsay and spite, gnawed at my conscience. I feared for what might become of Stacy if this continued unchecked. The thought of her being driven away by these baseless accusations, or worse, was unbearable. As I lay awake at night, the bakery closed and the town asleep, I turned over in my mind what could be done. The alternative, standing by while an innocent person was persecuted, was something I could not countenance. The air in our small town had changed, thick with a sense of dread and suspicion that seemed to seep into every crack and corner. The transformation of the town's perception of Stacy reached a point that was both surreal and horrifying. Children, echoing the sentiments they heard at home, would shout, "Witch!" as she passed, their voices shrill and accusatory. The adults, who should have known better, regarded her with a mixture of fear and loathing, as if her very presence was a blight upon our community. I witnessed one particularly harrowing incident when Stacy visited the local pharmacy. The owner, I had known for years, suddenly turned to her. His face contorted with anger and disdain, he called her a fallen woman and ordered her out. Watching this, I felt a mixture of shock and despair. It seemed the town I knew was unraveling, its sense of community and decency eroding before my eyes. But the real horror began shortly thereafter. Michael was found dead in the woods, his body in a state that spoke of a violent end. The town reeled from this discovery, the shockwaves of fear and confusion palpable in the air. Then, mere days later, Emily vanished. When her body was found in a cave near the town, the circumstances were eerily similar to Michael's demise. Initially, the town speculated about a wild beast, a rogue predator, that had somehow found its way into our midst. But this theory was soon overshadowed by a more sinister narrative. Whispers began to circulate that Stacy was responsible, that these deaths were her doing. The word killer appeared scrawled across the wall of her house, a chilling accusation that seemed to confirm the town's worst fears. Stacy's visits to my bakery became a shadow of what they once were. Gone were the days of easy conversation and shared laughter. Now, she entered quietly, her presence almost ghost-like. Her eyes, once so full of life, were clouded with a deep sadness, a weariness that seemed to weigh heavily on her soul. I attempted to reach out to her, to offer some semblance of comfort and support in these dark times. But she had retreated into herself, her once bright spirit dimmed by the relentless tide of suspicion and fear that engulfed her. Our exchanges were brief and perfunctory, the connection we once shared reduced to mere transactions. Each night, as I closed the bakery and made my way home through the silent streets, I found myself haunted by the turn of events. The darkness that had descended upon us seemed to touch everything, casting long shadows that stretched into the very heart of our community. As the days passed, the tension in the town grew, a tightening noose of paranoia and accusation. I knew that something had to give, that this situation could not continue indefinitely. But what could be done? The atmosphere in our town had become charged with a palpable tension, a thick fog of suspicion and fear that seemed to cling to the very air we breathed. In the wake of the tragedies involving Michael and Emily, Stacy's world had shrunk to the confines of her home, a sanctuary besieged by the relentless onslaught of the town's collective paranoia. Her visits to my bakery, once a regular occurrence, had dwindled to rare, fleeting moments. Each time she appeared, a ghost of her former self, I could see the toll the situation was taking on her. It seemed my humble store was her last bastion of human connection, a place where she could find a semblance of normalcy and understanding amidst the chaos engulfing her life. But even that small comfort was short-lived. The hostility directed at Stacy escalated following the deaths of Michael and Emily. Her house, once a quaint and unassuming dwelling, had become the focus of the town's ire. Stones shattered her windows, and hateful messages marred her walls. The townspeople, driven by a maelstrom of fear and ignorance, clamored for her arrest, branding her a witch, a murderer, a bringer of curses upon our once peaceful town. The police, in their attempts to quell the rising hysteria, stated unequivocally that Stacy had alibis, that there was no evidence linking her to the deaths. But their words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the cacophony of rumors and prejudice. The town was in the grip of a hysteria that seemed to grow more fevered with each passing day, and I feared what this unchecked frenzy might lead to. In the solitude of my bakery, I often found my thoughts turning to Stacy. The image of her, confined to her home, a prisoner of fear and suspicion, haunted me. It pained me deeply to think of her suffering alone, cut off from the world by a barrier of unfounded accusations and hate. As the days passed, the situation only worsened. The once friendly and welcoming community I had known was transformed into a mob driven by fear and a hunger for retribution. It was a terrifying spectacle to behold, the way one rumor, one unfounded fear, could unravel the fabric of a person's life so completely. In my heart, I prayed for Stacy's resilience, for her strength to endure this storm of hatred and vitriol. I promised myself that I would do whatever I could to help her, to shield her from the worst of the town's cruelty. It was a vow born of a deep sense of injustice, a need to stand up for what was right in the face of overwhelming odds. The night had unfolded under a moonlit sky, its serene light belying the horror that was about to descend upon our small town. The tranquility of the evening was shattered by an act of unspeakable cruelty, one that would forever mark the darkest chapter in the history of our community. It was a group of masked assailants who perpetrated the heinous act. They descended upon Stacy's house like a plague, their faces hidden behind masks, dehumanizing them and shielding their identity from the world. With a brutality that was chilling, they broke into her home, violating the sanctity of her last refuge. I was returning from the woods, the stillness of my nightly chores providing a stark contrast to the chaos that I would soon encounter. As I neared Stacy's house, a sense of foreboding gripped me, a premonition of something amiss. The scene that greeted me was one of pure terror. Stacy, in nothing but her undergarments, lay unconscious on the cold, hard ground. The violence of her attackers was evident in her bruises and the way her body lay twisted in pain. They had dragged her out into the street, beaten her mercilessly, and left her there in the freezing night, her life hanging in the balance. My heart raced with fear and anger as I rushed to her side. Calling the police and an ambulance, I could barely contain my rage and despair. The emergency responders arrived swiftly, their lights piercing the night, casting long shadows on the ground. As they attended to Stacy, I followed them to the hospital, my mind reeling from the brutality of the attack. The hospital became the center of a maelstrom of emotions and inquiries. The police worked tirelessly to piece together the events of that night. It soon became clear that the attack was the result of a vendetta, a misguided act of retribution. Emily's older brothers, fueled by their mother's conviction that Stacy was to blame for Emily's death, had orchestrated this cruel act of vengeance. In the sterile environment of the hospital, I sat by Stacy's bedside, watching her battle for life. Her injuries were a testament to the savagery she had endured. The beeping of the machines provided a constant reminder of the precariousness of her condition. It was a sight that tore at my soul, seeing her so vulnerable, so close to slipping away. The days that followed were a blur of police activity, community uproar, and a deep sense of soul-searching. The attack on Stacy had laid bare the darkest aspects of our town's psyche, the fear, the prejudice, and the capacity for violence that lurked beneath the surface. The days following Stacy's attack were fraught with a tension that hung over the town like a dense fog. But nothing prepared us for the macabre events that unfolded 3 days later. Emily's mother and her older brothers, the architects of Stacy's suffering, were found dead in an abandoned house in the woods. The scene was gruesome, their bodies mangled, marked by deep, savage claw wounds that defied explanation. The police, already investigating them for their attack on Stacy, now faced a scene of horror that spoke of a brutal, animalistic revenge. But the most chilling twist was yet to come. In the dead of night, Stacy disappeared from the hospital. The police officer stationed outside her room was adamant that there was no way she could have left on her own. The possibility of her jumping from the 5th floor window was unthinkable, and the surveillance cameras offered no clues. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The town was abuzz with speculation and fear. Rumors began to circulate, wild and unfounded, painting Stacy as a creature of the night, a vengeful specter exacting retribution on those who had wronged her. These rumors gained momentum after the local drugstore, where Stacy had once been publicly humiliated, was razed to the ground in an unexplained fire. The discovery of the pharmacist's body among the ruins only added fuel to the fire of speculation. A pall of fear settled over the town. Nightfall brought with it an eerie silence, the streets deserted as people barricaded themselves in their homes. The evenings were spent in hushed gatherings, where the townsfolk exchanged theories and whispered about the latest developments. The once vibrant community was now gripped by a paranoia that twisted every shadow into a lurking menace, every noise into a potential threat. The police were at a loss, their investigations leading nowhere. The lack of evidence, the absence of any rational explanation for the events that had transpired, left them grasping at straws. The days following the series of tragic events were like a descent into a nightmarish abyss for our small town. The atmosphere was thick with fear and suspicion, a poisonous cloud that tainted every interaction, every whispered conversation. People were gripped by a paranoia that turned neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. As the tension escalated, more tragedies unfolded. A few more townsfolk, those rumored to have defaced Stacy's home with hateful inscriptions, were found dead under mysterious and chilling circumstances. This only served to amplify the fear and hysteria that had taken hold of the community. In a desperate bid for retribution, or perhaps driven by a collective madness, the townspeople decided to burn down Stacy's house. despite the best efforts of the local police to maintain order. The mob, fueled by fear and anger, broke through and set the house ablaze. The fire roared into the night sky, a beacon of the town's descent into chaos. But the fire did not stop at Stacy's doorstep. In a cruel twist of fate, it spread to neighboring houses, then to another, growing into an uncontrollable inferno that soon engulfed the entire town. People ran frantically, their screams piercing the night as they tried in vain to save their homes, their lives. From a distance, under the cold gaze of the moon, I watched the town succumb to the flames, my body transformed into its true form. The transformation was both a curse and a salvation, a secret I had guarded closely within the confines of this small town. Covered in black wool, impervious to knife or bullet, I was the embodiment of an ancient legend. A werewolf. I could still feel on my claws the flesh of all those people who dared to insult my love, my Stacy. But I wasn't alone. Standing next to me was a woman who was the unwitting catalyst for the madness in the city. My Stacy. As the flames devoured the town, I remembered the days spent in the bakery, the art of transforming simple ingredients into delightful pastries. But this night, there was no creation, only destruction. A grim mirror of the hate and fear that had consumed the hearts of the townspeople. The irony of it all was not lost on me. I had wanted to bring joy to these people, to share the simple pleasures of life. Yet, in their blindness and rage, they had brought ruin upon themselves. The town, once a symbol of community and warmth, was now a blazing inferno, a testament to the destructive power of fear and prejudice. This town should burn like failed buns in the oven. In that moment, a sense of profound sadness enveloped me. These people, who had so quickly succumbed to their basest instincts, did not deserve the tranquility they had taken for granted. Yet, for Stacy's sake, the woman who had shown me kindness in the midst of chaos, I chose the path of forgiveness. We turned away from the burning town, leaving behind the screams and panic, the crackling of the fire consuming everything I had once held dear. It was a farewell to a life that could no longer be, a chapter closed in the most tragic and irrevocable way.